You either went back to school or you went to Vietnam. Probably 90% of the people, when I tell them that I work with the blind, ask me, so you know sign language? People will often use their fears as a way of filtering whether or not they could see a person doing this job, rather than face that and say, oh, yeah, I guess there is a way that the person could do it and do it well. They just block that.
David, you're like the Mother Teresa of career counselors, man.
You build upon your successes.
Okay.
And you don't give up.
Hi, everybody. This is Dan Dante, another episode of Middle-Aged Mess, the show for people who couldn't get out of childhood without having at least one concussion on the merry-go-round. So today we've got David Petrovay. David, how are you?
I'm doing well, Dan. How are you today?
I'm good. And David, I had a new strategy on your particular podcast, and I don't know why I did this, but I thought it'd be fun. I have absolutely no idea who you are. Zero. I don't know what you do. I don't know what you talk about. I don't know anything about you. And I wanted to just kind of see like how that would roll through a podcast. Like if I just find out about you on the spot.
Well, I suppose I could start with, I was born on a dark and dreary night.
Look, if you're going to get all Edgar Allan Poe on me, this is not going to last very long. Dave, so yeah, let's start. Forget about what you do now. I'm not interested in that for the time being. Let's talk about who you are, where you came from, like what's going, like let's start there. Where were you born?
My life began back in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Go Pitt. Pitt is it, man. I was a big Pirates fan as a kid. I don't know why. In the We Are Family years, 1979, Dave Parker, Willie Stargell, that was my life back then.
Right. So that's where it began. And I was born in the late 1940s. So I'm an early baby boomer.
Okay, you're a youngster. You're a youngster. I'm your infant, a babe in the woods.
That's right. I grew up in what would be considered humble beginnings in the shadow of the steel mills of Pittsburgh.
Was your family a steel family? Like, did your dad work in the mills?
No, but his brothers did.
Okay.
And my cousins did.
Okay.
So my father, his trade was, he was a mail carrier.
Okay.
For all of his life. Everyone loved him because he delivered their checks.
He's my kind of guy. I like your dad too. But let me ask you, have you been to Pittsburgh recently? Do you still go back there? You still live there now?
Right now, I live in Bend, Oregon.
Oh, okay.
My last trip back to Pittsburgh was in June of 2016.
Okay, so relatively recently. So I did this thing. I took my kids to all 30 Major League Baseball stadiums. So we went to every city, went to 30 metropolitan areas of the United States. And I had no idea. I'm a lifelong Angelino from California, although I live in Vegas now. But I went to Pittsburgh, and all I knew about Pittsburgh was, Terry Bradshaw and steel mills. I didn't know anything else, and I assumed it was just one big foundry. And when I drove into the city, I'm like, this is beautiful. Like, it was beautiful. I mean, got the three rivers there. I mean, there's trees all over the place. The downtown was gorgeous. The stadium, by the way, is spectacular, PNC Park. And I was super surprised. In my mind, it's just, I'm going to see smoke belching out of factories, and it was a super modern, beautiful place.
And the smoke belching out of factories was my childhood.
Okay.
Because if you were to ask me the question, what color is the sky at night? The answer would have been red.
Oh, wow.
Because the fire's belching
right.
from the steel mills.
Now, did you guys realize at the time, like the health effects of all that, or that wasn't part of the commentary yet?
No, we weren't aware at the time because literally no one gave us the feedback about the health consequences of breathing in all of those particulates. And someone said that they took an X-ray of people's lungs. These are people who never smoked. Their lungs were impregnated, all of these pieces of particulates. So we all had gray lungs.
Right.
And when we moved away, they went back to being pink, the color they were supposed to be.
How old were you when you moved away?
So I moved out of Pittsburgh when I was 29. That was the first move I made. I went from Pittsburgh to Tucson, Arizona.
Okay, that's quite a difference right there of about 100 degrees per day, right?
Oh, yes, very much so.
Yeah.
And people say, where did you get that great tan? I said, just walking from building to building.
Exactly. If you didn't get skin cancer walking, I mean, it's hot out there, man.
Well, in fact, you bring up skin cancer. I just had a procedure done where they removed skin cancer,
Oh, I'm sorry.
probably a result of my living there and being in the sun as much as I was, Dan.
Yeah, no, I got it. So did you go to University of Pittsburgh?
I did both a bachelor's and a master's. I was actually with the band, the pit band, for 3 years.
Oh, right on. What instrument did you play?
I didn't. My friends were all in the band and they said, hey, you don't have to play an instrument in order to be a part of this. So I was the head of what they called the operations crew.
Okay.
So we did all the special effects when they would do a halftime show. We made sure that everyone had water. All the instruments were packed when we went on a trip.
You got to go to all the games. That must have been awesome.
That's right. And not only the games in Pittsburgh, but this was a time where I think Pitt had money. So they hired private jets.
Oh my God. Must have been a long time ago. A long time ago.
I remember flying Eastern Airlines, if you still remember them.
Vaguely. Yeah. Wow.
And so we went from there down to Florida and we played a game down there, went to Oklahoma, played in South Bend, Indiana at Notre Dame.
Oh, wow. That must have been a lot of fun. That must have been a lot of fun back then. That's cool. Why'd you go to Tucson?
Well, I went for work. My graduate training was in teaching the blind. Probably 90% of the people, when I tell them that I work with the blind, ask me, so you know sign language? It's just a natural association. And I said, yes, I know sign language because I work in dual schools with both deaf and blind.
Okay.
So in order to communicate with the students and staff, I needed to learn sign language.
How did you get involved with the blind? I mean, you had to know Braille, which means you had to learn it, right?
I had to learn it, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, my doctoral dissertation focused on the topic of how did people ever decide that they wanted to pursue this profession?
Yeah, that's a good question. What was the conclusion?
The number one reason was to help.
Okay.
To help others. And number two was they knew someone who was blind, and I didn't know anyone who was blind. Mine was the fact that it was 1970, right, and there weren't a lot of choices in terms of one's future. So you either went back to school or you went to Vietnam.
Ah, okay. Got it.
So I went through the physical and didn't pass it.
Thank God. Thank God, right?
Yes. Yeah. So that created an opening for me to be accepted into graduate school. And when I was deciding which area of special education to pursue, I interviewed the head of every department in special ed. And finally, when I got to the last one, it was the person who did the education for the blind. And I said at the end of it, I could do that.
Rock and roll, man. Hey, your life turns on a dime. You never know. You really turn right, you turn left. I mean, who knows what's going to happen?
So I started that position as a teacher, classroom teacher in 1971.
So when you made the decision that you were going to go and teach blind kids or blind adults or blind in general, how long did it take you to learn Braille?
Believe it or not, the entire master's program was done in like 9 months.
To learn Braille, like fluently, no issue? Seriously?
We had to learn it all in about 9 months because they were hurting for teachers back then.
How easy is it to learn? I mean, it seems like impossible to me, but...
Well, it's a code.
Right. And obviously I've seen Braille, but just like the concept to me of running your fingers over it and distinguishing each one of the codes fast enough that you can decipher a word. It's like fascinating to me. It's just, I can't believe that people can do it. And especially to do it all in 9 months. I mean, that's remarkable.
Well,
it seems remarkable.
When I went through the program, they did not require us to read it tactily.
Okay.
You only had to read it visually. So now when I look at Braille, even though I've been out of the field for a while, when I see those dots, those are words.
Now, did you ever learn how to do it with your fingers or no?
No, I tried it. It was hilarious.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it must be, not impossible because obviously people do it, but it's just amazing to me that they can do it with their fingers. It's crazy.
And it was, when I would try to do it, it was like a kindergartner trying to read for the first time.
Yeah. Can imagine. So we get through our master's, we get through our thesis, we get through all that good stuff, and now we go to Tucson to teach blind kids?
Yes.
What was the name of the school?
So that was the Arizona State Schools for the Deaf and the Blind in Tucson.
Okay.
So I was there for 22 years in a variety of roles.
How is it?
And
How is it? And I don't know if you know the difference, but I'm just curious. Like, so when you're teaching blind children, is it
mhm,
is it markedly different from teaching any other kind of children? You know, the more, or is it just the same? It's just teaching, and they're just kids.
well, the teaching part of it is the same.
Okay.
What's different is the methodology. Remember, when you're working with regular kids, they're taking in most of that information visually. With these, they don't have that modality. So I had to translate everything into tactile.
Okay.
So I would do charts and graphs in various textures. Well, one of the most challenging things was I substituted in a class one time, and they were doing trigonometry, they were doing geometry, and I had to explain it to them
How do you
in
explain
non.
them what's a circle or a triangle or a parallelogram? I mean,
Well, those are actually easy enough
yeah.
because you give them shapes
Okay. Yeah.
and you explain that this shape is this word. Okay? And I remember one time I had to teach equations, polynomial equations,
Wow.
and I figured out a technique for doing that for the kids. And I said, okay, now you're going to have to figure out what the coordinates are. And the way we're going to determine whether or not you're correct or not is we're going to have a tactile graph, and you're going to use push pins
Okay.
to mark each of the coordinates. And then you're going to take a rubber band and you're going to stretch the rubber band across those push pins. And if you're correct, it'll all fall into a straight line. I'll tell you what, it really involved being creative.
Oh no, I can't even imagine how much. What's the speed of learning? Do they learn because of all these different techniques you have to come up with? Does it take longer to teach a standard course, or is it pretty much the same?
Same. Yeah, the students I worked with were of normal intelligence.
Right.
So all I had to do was to modify the curriculum based upon their needs.
Got it. Okay,
Mhm.
so you're there for 22 years. It's a long
Yes,
time, and then you
yes,
moved on to where?
California.
Smart.
So I
Smart.
was I was in the Bay Area working at the School for the Blind there, and I was there for 5 years.
Yeah.
And I started out as a resource teacher and then did 4 years as a vice principal position. And at that point, Dan, after 34 years,
Yeah.
it was time to pull the plug.
I can imagine. Did you ever have any aspirations to go teach kids sighted children? Was there ever, or you were very happy with there's something about the blind that kind of drew you in?
I was very happy working with the students.
Yeah.
I had a very good relationship with them. In fact, I've been out of the field for quite a few years now. I left in 2005,
Okay.
and I still stay in touch with those students.
Yeah, I can imagine. I would
Yeah.
think there's got to be like a special bond too. You know, you're dealing with kids who have a special need that makes it very challenging for them to live in society, and you're helping them. I mean, it has to feel really good at the end of the day when you're, part of that, of them, being able to live a normal, well-regulated life.
And they're grandparents now.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And so
got
they
it.
tell me about their grandchildren and the challenges that they have. And most of them have sighted children.
Now what are we
Mhm.
doing?
Then came the big question of what's next.
Yes. It's a big
And I'm
question.
sure many people they have to tackle that question. So I looked at the work that I had done over my career and asked myself, what did I enjoy doing the most? And it was the career counseling.
Mm,
I had done that for about 8 years at the high school level. And then I thought, it was one of my favorite classes when I was doing my master's work at the University of Arizona. So let me look into this. And it took a while to become established. I worked 2 short-term jobs doing that with adults. The first group were people with special needs,
hmm
and
Like what
then it
kind of
was
what kind of special needs?
everything. So they were adults who might have had cerebral palsy and they were in a wheelchair.
Right.
In some cases, there was someone who was deaf, someone who was visually impaired. So I used my experience to help them identify the work that they could do.
David, you're like the Mother Teresa of career counselors, man. You're just
Well, when it comes to that, you're right.
taking care of the whole world. I mean, you should move to Calcutta or something. I mean, it's
Yeah,
fantastic.
never know. That might be next for me, Dan.
I got it. All right. So you spent a couple years doing that, and then what happened?
Yep. And then I realized that I was going to go nowhere because of my creativity, and I was highly motivated, high performing. And basically, the jobs that I had
Mm,
told me, no, that's not why we hired you. We didn't hire you to be creative. We didn't hire you to come up with classes that we could teach.
yeah.
So you sit in your cubicle and do the work that we tell you to do.
You know, I have a relative who works for the United Way. I think it's United Way. And what her job is to help place special needs adults into jobs. You know, mostly she works with autistic people. I was just talking to her the other day, man, and she's just says, I knock on these doors and I go into these little shithole retail places, like places you would think would be dying for somebody who's going to come in and be loyal and hardworking and try their best, be able to do something. And she's like, you're beating your head against the wall. Like there's such a stigma, a bias against special needs, especially special needs adults,
Yes.
right? You know, it's like when special needs people are in their childhood, they have a school that protects them. They have IEPs. They have a whole range of resources that society has given them to make it through. But once they hit adulthood, they're kind of on their own to a large extent. And she told me how frustrating it is to try and find a way for special needs adults to find their way in the world, you know?
And one of the obstacles there, Dan, is that people will often use their fears
Yeah.
as a way of filtering whether or not they could see a person doing this job. So, for instance, with someone who's visually impaired or blind, most people can't see themselves functioning
Yeah.
as a blind person.
Right.
So, rather than face that and say, oh, yeah, I guess there is a way that the person could do it and do it well, they just block that
Yeah.
for those.
They shut it down. All right. So you got tired of that. It's too hard, too much of a pain in the ass. And you decided to go where?
Start my own business.
Oops. Now we're thinking. All right. Now we're getting entrepreneurial. Let's get after it. Okay.
Yes. So, had no experience at all in how to run a business.
Right.
So, I had to start from square one.
Right.
And that was basically, going into the city where I lived and filing a form.
So you have no experience, no entrepreneurial experience in your life. Nobody in your family has any entrepreneurial experience in your life. How old were you at the time?
I was probably, let's see, I did this in 2008.
There's a massive worldwide
2008.
recession going on at the same time.
Yep, same time. So that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to do this.
Well, how old were you again? You're probably about in your 60s almost, or late 50s.
Yeah, I mean, I would have been late 50s.
How do you get the balls in your late 50s to say, I'm going to go out and do this thing on my own? Like, how do you do? Like, how does your because you don't even know what you were doing. You had no idea what to do. You had no experience. You probably had very little guidance. You didn't even really know the first step of what does a business even mean? How do I start this thing? It's a pretty ballsy move, right?
So I think what got me through it was being stupid.
It always helps. Always helps.
If I had thought through this, Dan, I never would have moved forward with that plan.
Right. I got it.
I thought, okay, how do you get started? Well, you go in and you file to open a business.
Right.
And did that. And then, okay, the next step is how do you find clients?
Right.
So that was a challenge.
How did you do it?
Most of it was, I think when I first started out, it was the fact that I was part of a professional organization, and I used that to begin to attract clients.
Okay.
And then I started to volunteer to do webinars.
Okay. All right.
And that started bringing people my way.
So can I ask you a question I ask most consultants who come on my show or who I just know anywhere in real life, because I'm always fascinated by it. So I've started probably 300 businesses in my life. I've been starting businesses since I was 18 years old, right? So I've done a million different things. But even with all of my experience in being in business and doing all the different stuff I've done, I can't imagine saying to somebody, I'm a consultant, pay me for just the things I'm going to tell you. I'm going to give you advice in anything, and I want you to pay me money for it. It doesn't compute in my head that somebody would actually pay me money to have a discussion with them about what they should do with their life. How did you I don't know if it's courage, maybe it's stupidity, like you said. I don't know what it is that makes you think that, hey, you know what? I'm going to go to this person. I'm going to get $100 an hour or whatever, and I'm going to talk to them, and I'm worth every bit of that $100.
It's called self-confidence, Dan.
Okay.
Okay. And the way that that happens is you build upon your successes.
Okay.
And you don't give up. I remember when I first started, I had months where I only had one client.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, I believe in myself enough that I'm not going to give up on this.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, that's a lesson in and of itself, right?
Right. And believe me, there are times where I'm scheduling a client and they're telling me what their needs are. And I go, oh my gosh, I don't know if I know enough to be able to guide them.
Right.
And I do.
Right.
So it's learning how to ask the right questions.
Okay.
Yeah. People have the answers within them. They just need to have those answers drawn out. And that's what you get to do as an effective counselor.
Got it. And so what's your process? Your process is you're finding somebody who obviously has a direction or a goal in mind and what they want to do with their lives, and they're just not there yet. They feel like they need help to get to that ultimate goal, right?
Right.
So what's the process? I mean, are you just talking to them? I mean, is there a program you have? What do you do?
No, I don't do an established program. I know people who have formulas and they don't digress from the formula. I talk to the person initially and say, what is it that you're looking for in working together? And that's what guides the process. So they might say, I want to be able to use the skills and experience that I've developed over the years, but doing something different than I do now.
Right.
So we look at what those options are. And, it's very interesting that things like AI can help with that process.
Yeah.
Because you can just, type in to Chat GPT, I'm looking for occupations that include these skills.
Shit, you better watch out, David. You might be out of business. I don't know if you want to tell anybody about that.
Well, but it gives them a start.
Right.
They really say to me as we go through this process, Dan, I needed someone to help me think through this. Because you have enough experience in your life that you can apply it to what I'm going through. And one of the things I find that's so helpful about being older, I have yet to come across a situation where I haven't had direct experience with it.
Yeah.
Someone says to me, well, I'm dealing with a really difficult boss. Been there, done that.
Yeah.
So we talk about strategies that they can use.
When do you feel like you've given enough guidance and advice to a client that you're done with them or they're done with you?
Well, one of the things that we addressed right at the beginning is, what do you hope to accomplish in our working together? What is your goal?
Right.
Once they've reached that goal, they can say, well, I either want to establish a new goal or thank you so much for what you've done for me, and I'm off and running.
Got it.
And so how long does that last? You gave different time periods. It's all of the above.
Yeah.
I've had clients that I've been coaching for 6 years now on a regular basis. Now, these are not people who are looking for work. They're people who are employed, and they're dealing with situations in the workplace that are challenging, and they need a sounding board.
What's your sweet spot? Who are the people that you are best positioned to work with?
Probably motivated professionals.
So age doesn't really matter to you. He can be 20 or 70, doesn't matter.
I've got them in their early 20s. I think the oldest person I worked with was 75. But before I had a chance to finish up my, him reaching his goal,
he died.
Away, yeah.
Of course.
I hope that he did so feeling like he was making positive changes in his life.
Yeah, no, I got it. And do you work with people just in the United States or all over the world?
I've worked with people all over the world. So the only thing we have to deal with there are differences in time zones.
What's your most successful client relationship?
I think anyone where they arrive with low self-esteem, low self-confidence, and in working together, I see a transformation in them.
So you're talking about me, right? In the last 30 minutes, is that?
Could be.
I mean, do you feel like you're more experienced, more engaged, or something that you offer that other people can't necessarily offer?
Well, I think experience is a big part of it because I've been doing it for over 25 years.
Right.
And I think the feedback that I get from people who say that they really get a lot out of working with me is the engagement,
Right.
because they will say, you get it.
So
When
you're involved. You're involved. I mean, you're
yes.
part of their lives while you're doing this.
Yeah. And so when they talk about the challenges and I share what my experience is, the feedback is, then you get it. You get what I'm going through.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Where can people get in touch with you, David?
So you can get in touch with me at davidpetrovay@gmail.com. And I have a website that is davidpetrovaycoaching.com. And I'm in the process of redesigning that website.
Okay.
So I just hired someone. They're going to come in and they're going to, make it more updated. Typically with the website, you don't want to have it up for more than 3 years before you make changes.
It's a little bit dated. I got you. Well, David, you're providing a really valuable service. I love what you're doing. I love the fact that you spent 34 years teaching the blind. I mean, that's really a remarkable achievement. We need more people like you out there. And I appreciate you coming on today and spending a little time with us.
Yeah, and by the way, life was messy during that time.
All right, y'all. So it's been another episode of Middle Age Mess. Give me a like, give me a subscribe. Go send an email to David Petrovay, Petrovay @gmail.com. And we'll see you next time.